All right, well, good morning or afternoon, depending on where you may be. Thank you for standing by, and welcome to today's Cloud Services Community Webinar. Our topic for today is, are you missing out on wireless LAN pull-through business? All phone lines are currently in a listen-only mode, and later there will be a question and answer session with instructions being given at that time. You can ask a question at any time using the chat window and question box located in the control panel. But all chat and questions will be answered at the end of the presentation with the rest of the Q&A portion. Today's session is being recorded, and we'll be providing a copy of today's materials following the call. Now I'd like to introduce our expert speaker for today's webinar. Michelle Sutherland has over 7 years of experience in the telecom industry. She currently serves as a product manager of Pro Services for Adtran's Enterprise Network Division, which includes a global portfolio of 3 service segments: ProStart, Planning and Implementation, ProCare, Maintenance and Support, and ProCloud, Managed Services. Michelle works with Adtran channel customers to help develop new services and improve existing ones from the perspective of how to empower partners with Adtran solutions. She is responsible for developing the market requirements of new services, managing service offering life cycles, and working on developing go-to-market strategies. Michelle, go ahead and take it away.
Thanks so much, Sam. I appreciate it. And thank you to everyone who took the time today to participate in our conversation about wireless LAN pull-through business. This is a very, very exciting topic, particularly because the market in and of itself is at a very exciting time. So the goal of this presentation today is to talk about what the wireless LAN market is doing, particularly in the hosted and managed wireless space, because there's in particular there some activity that is of great interest to those folks who are involved in cloud services. And then take a look at how do I approach this market, particularly the hosted and managed wireless market, with either combining it with existing service offerings, leading with wireless, and how to package this wireless to increase your overall cloud services revenue and augment that monthly reoccurring revenue. So great different topics to jump into today. And so to set the stage about what the wireless LAN market is doing, it probably would make sense to look at it holistically. And by holistically, I mean looking at access points being sold, as well as the controllers or infrastructure, as well as the services and software that might go into this total wireless package. So when you take a look at this slide here, first and foremost, look at the approximate value of the addressable market for enterprise wireless LAN. It's $5 billion. And if you look at that, how that $5 billion is accumulated, only about 10% is derived from service providers today. Now, if you look year over year and even quarter over quarter, you'll see just tremendous growth in this wireless LAN market, about 20% annual growth since 2010. And it actually peaked at a record revenue in Q4 of last year with $1.2 billion of market in that quarter alone. Now, kind of delving a little bit more into this market size and how is it built, if you take a look at where different revenue drivers are coming from, you'll see that the controller revenue has been fairly flat and as markets shift to kind of a different approach of services and software. And that really, of course, is the heart of what we're going to talk today as far as the cloud approach for wireless LAN. But very important to note that even amongst all of this tremendous growth, if you look at the individual components, where you see substantial growth is more in the services and software elements as opposed to the perhaps more traditional controller revenue that would normally comprise of your wireless LAN market. And I'm sure it's of no surprise to those folks who are on the line today about contributing factors into driving that wireless market growth. And so the whole world is going wireless, and there's this expectation of needing to be connected to wireless. In preparing for this particular presentation, I thought about the last time I had actually connected to a wired port. And in the last 2.5 years, I've actually only connected to a wired port for Internet access once. So once out of all of this time, there's this expectation and certainly demand to be connected everywhere. Of course, the latest term in our industry that is already being used quite heavily is this Internet of Things, right? So this concept of being connected, whether it's people or things connected to the Internet. If you also look at the next generation of devices, they're only connecting wirelessly. So we're actually removing the option to have that wired connection in a lot of products. There's already several devices that are out in the marketplace today that no longer have a wired port to connect to, and that will continue to be the trend. The other thing to think about when you look at what's driving the growth in our wireless LAN market are apps, these applications that are moving onto the network. And there's great examples of both software and application and this cloud type of environment that's becoming increasingly popular, and of course then increasingly drives the demand to have that reliable, always-on connection. For most folks, especially those who are involved in the wireless space today, the emergence of newer and faster standards like 802.11ac certainly are helping to drive that growth. And lastly, when you look at the demand, there's the spread now. Initially, early adopters, healthcare, education, retail, hospitality are now moving to other new adopters. And kind of to delve into that a little bit more, when you talk about the healthcare industry, certainly there's a lot of need for wireless as far as electronic records, as well as communication between multiple devices that might be used in a healthcare facility. In education, the tremendous surge of bring your own device, particularly with the students bringing that in and going paperless, and the E-rate funding that has been related to driving those initiatives of network infrastructure and wireless services to complement that BYOD initiative. From a retail perspective, and we'll talk about this more a little bit later in the slide deck, wireless was a nice to have, something complementary to offer your rotating guests. However, now wireless has become a tool to gather retail analytics. Things like, where do my customers go and stand and look at? What do they look at in the store? What's their dwell time in certain areas of a store? Or can I get this guest who comes into my store to subscribe? So now I can get their email address and in turn give them a coupon. Or even better, can I identify them perhaps in the strip mall, even though they're not in my store, and send them a coupon to help drive them to my store? Who's standing outside of my storefront, and how can I bring them in? So all of these marketing analytics information that can help now drive the retailer to make changes in their practice, and it's completely mined now from this wireless network. And of course, hospitality, a core early adopter in hospitality, being able to provide business as well as vacationing guests the ability to get out onto the internet. And of course, now driving that to a monetization, so perhaps giving away free Wi-Fi at a base level, if you will, and then being able to monetize a higher speed throughput, which would have perhaps your guests would use to stream videos or something of that nature, and to help actually monetize your wireless. So early core adopters who adopted for multiple different reasons as appropriate to their vertical, and have, of course, over time now continue to adjust and change in how they want to use that wireless that they adopted and the advantages that they can get from the wireless adoption. And of course, new areas like assisted living and finance. A great example with assisted living is if you actually look at how many folks are on Facebook today. So I think Gartner published earlier this year that there was like 1.1 billion folks that were registered on Facebook alone. And actually, in a separate analysis, it was seen that the biggest driver demographically now of folks getting onto Facebook is actually with the elderly. And it makes sense. It's an easier way for them to stay connected with their friends and their family, particularly those who might be remote. And it is so not surprising then that folks like assisted living facilities are now trying to provide wireless and have a very easy ease of use story, for those folks who are now staying in their facilities, staying in their homes, so they can get out onto the Facebook so they can easily connect with their friends and family who are remote. So this is a value add now that they can offer to their prospective clients. So a lot of different things are driving the growth, but certainly interrelated in where that growth is coming from. And we talked about the concept of BYOD, particularly for E-rate funding as related to education, but certainly it is not exclusive to that particular vertical. I think we've all felt the impact of BYOD, and in fact are probably participants in it. It looks like the average U.S. employee brings about 3 wireless connecting devices to their job every day. So concept of having multiple devices to now be connected, both to perform business tasks as well as non-business tasks, and also wanting to be able to get to those same software applications and apps and services on their primary laptop or desktop machine, as well as the multiple devices that they brought in from personal use. And we've spoken to the Wi-Fi being that preferred method to access the LAN. Certainly it is with me, but just increasingly devices not having those ports even built into them any longer. If you look at new buildings that are being brought up, a lot of them are electing not to do the drops for wired access. It's a way to save money, and it's just not as common any longer. This study advancements of VW LAN in terms of speed and security, and certainly 11AC is a great example of that as well. So speaking more and kind of delving into this concept of bringing your own device and mobile device management a little bit longer, originally there was certainly a desire from an IT management perspective to try to have very stringent and secure policies wrapped around mobile device management and BYOD. And you really see now that that is just not as common, that those kind of stringent security policies that are kind of blanket-wide are just not as adopted any longer. And so kind of trying to get to a way to manage those devices connecting, not so much in preventing them from connecting, but perhaps ensuring the security through guest access only or other ways to secure both their employee side information as well as from the guest side. So different methods now really being taken as opposed to trying to really limit and constrain the mobile devices that are getting onto a wireless network. And this really plays into the fact that the approach of wireless has changed and evolved so much. When you look at originally, even amongst those early adopters, there were specific core business drivers which have, of course, changed over time. But as well, being able to provide wireless as a complementary service. And now that's shifting so much where now instead of wanting to keep devices off of the network, now it says wanting them to come on, whether it's for that monetization, the hotel being a great example of that, or with retail and analytics, so gathering information about that user and what they might be doing on their network and what they might be looking at to help shape and drive their marketing plans and how they lay out a storefront, etc. Another good example of this kind of market analytics to get off of a wireless network and in a different vertical would actually be in the large public venue space. So stadiums and things of that nature might want to offer public wireless where you subscribe onto that public wireless, maybe gathering some demographic information and email address, and then you get coupons to the store, or maybe now you can see HD replays of what happened in the stadium, and things of that nature. So enhancing your experience at that particular venue, as well as now marketing to you and understanding who is coming to their events, so they can tailor how they deliver their marketing to their user base. So beneficial all the way around. So if you take a look now, at this whole VW LAN market, and then specifically this growth in services, this growth in cloud and hosted, and the needs that are now being wrapped around it, raising up the ante for business class Wi-Fi that's secure, addressing this need for reliable, always-on service across verticals, and particularly in light of the limited technical resources and budget constraints that most of your prospective end users would have, it's really the perfect combination for being able to sell wireless services, a wireless solution to your end user. The perceived value is great from the end user customer, and the different and differentiated ways to provide services wrapped around wireless is really so many. So this is an ideal time to really be involved in this wireless space and grow out that wireless story. Of particular note, is this desire to offload a solution. When you look at what IT managers would like to absorb internally and manage versus offload to a third party, wireless has increasingly been something that is desirable to offload. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Many folks think of the IT administrator at an elementary school with desktops and a voice system to manage. And now with the surge of devices on their infrastructure, there's many things for them to tackle, right? So wireless might be a good candidate of something to offload. But even more in a more general sense, wireless is still very much emerging and new to many folks who are in the IT space. So a little daunting perhaps from an expertise perspective. So desirable now to have someone else go in and manage it for them. But also security and compliances that are necessary, whether that's HIPAA or SOX or PCI, so different compliance requirements that may help them drive to seeking alternative support, alternative management, and expertise in that area. So multiple reasons why it is very desirable to offload that solution, and in many cases push to a virtualized solution or a solution in the cloud, because cloud certainly has wrapped around it lots of concepts about security as well as redundancy, availability, and things that we'll talk to in more depth later. So taking the cloud benefits, if you will, and now applying them onto wireless. And as we spoke about at the very beginning about the whole wireless LAN space and this growth now in services and software, that was coupled by an article that IDC recently published about worldwide cloud managed infrastructure and managed services. So this was really looking at just a subset of wireless truly in the pure hosted and managed space. And so it looked at the access points, infrastructure, software, and services that would be wrapped around that delivery model, that deployment model. And they actually predicted tremendous growth between this year and 2018, a growth of about $1.5 billion to eventually reach $2.5 billion by 2018. And again, hardware, software, infrastructure, and services all wrapped together, but specifically for this hosted and managed wireless. So while you'll still continue to see, again, on a broader scale, the wireless LAN business, that addressable market, still grow and still have tremendous potential. The area or subset area where you'll see particular prominent growth over the next few years will be in this software and services and hosting model of wireless. And I am certain that most, if not everyone who's on the call, has a cloud practice, is involved in cloud services, either through resell or delivers their own. But I thought it might be appropriate when we talk about hosted and managed wireless or cloud-delivered wireless solutions to kind of take a step back and see how that fits into kind of a more general concept of what cloud is. So certainly cloud is, at its purest sense, a way through which various either applications or software or services or storage can be performed. And of course, the most traditional concept of cloud is data storage. Infrastructure as a service, application and software as a service, hosted VoIP is a great example, unified communications as a service as a particular area of phenomenal growth in cloud, wireless local area networks or wireless LAN, which is particularly what we're speaking about today. But then as a kind of a natural evolution going from the wireless LAN now to your local area network or your wired LAN. So multiple different avenues of which cloud Wi-Fi plays a significant and ever-increasing role. So I'm going to pause here at this slide before we delve more into particular characteristics of cloud-managed wireless and why those might be desirable from an end-user perspective. And I wanted to do a couple polling questions to kind of get a feel for the audience's familiarity with wireless LAN and kind of what you guys are involved with today, so that we can continue to tailor the remainder of the presentation wrapped around kind of your levels of interest and different characteristics, as well as your experience with wireless. So with that being said, Sam, if you don't mind, I'll hand it back to you to do some of those polling questions.
Sure. Thanks, Michelle. Let's launch the first question here. Are you currently selling your own wireless services? So we'll leave this up here for a few seconds and let everyone kind of weigh in and vote. Let us know where they're at. We'll give it a few more seconds here. I think we got just over half of you on the line voted. Thank you so far. All right, we'll close that one for now. Let me share these with everybody. So, Michelle, here we got about a 50-50 split so far.
Okay.
Excuse me. Okay, we can move on to the next poll here. We're looking to gauge everyone's kind of level of expertise in wireless with this one. Give this about 10-15 more seconds. I think there might be still a few people out there that have yet to make their selection. All right. So it looks like we have a bulk of the folks here, Michelle, are intermediate and then some advanced as well. And then lastly, do you currently install wireless networks, sell wireless services, or both? All right. Thank you for sharing that. So it looks like we got a quarter of the audience installs, and then the remainder both sell and install. Michelle.
Great, great. Awesome. Thank you so much, Sam. I appreciate that.
No problem.
All right. So that is great feedback for us. So certainly, as you guys are, certainly in the wireless space today, already selling wireless, either installing and managing, et cetera. So if you guys have any questions, you continue to type them in to the panel, and we'll address those in the Q&A. And we're going to delve now into specifics about cloud Wi-Fi, and then go off to looking more how do you now pull these cloud wireless services into your business practice. So here's my comic for the day about being a cloud and the expectations now, of course, that people have on them. But one of the primary drivers, of course, not just to cloud wireless, but up to really any cloud solution, is this concept of being able to minimize your upfront capital expense. And this actually begs a very interesting question about how you price point your wireless services, particularly in this hosted and managed environment. The cloud certainly lends itself to a monthly reoccurring charge, which of course is very desirable from an end user, again, minimizing that upfront expense, making it an operating expense, but also from the partner perspective too, as a monthly reoccurring revenue certainly is a great revenue stream for you, very, very sticky, lowers your end user customer churn. But in and of itself, there's multiple ways to actually do this minimization of upfront capital expense. A very common approach is to sell the access points up front and then do your services, so your management and your hosting services on an MRC. You'll see some bundle in installation or other incidental charges like captive portal development into your MRC. And then a kind of a growing trend is to take the access point and any associated services, as well as the host, the software, as well as any associated services, and bundle all of it together into an MRC and really drive down the upfront expense and lower that barrier for entry for their end user customer. So a couple different intriguing models and how to deliver that MRC, and we'll talk more about that here in just a few minutes. Security and compliances, while certainly may be daunting tasks for your end user customer, are great from the perspective of delivering a hosted and managed wireless solution, purely because there are multiple ways to leverage the cloud infrastructure to help attain security and compliances. A very practical example is in a lot of cloud-based architectures, the separation of data plane versus control plane. So ensuring that the end user's private data actually never traverses the public cloud at all, but is contained within the local area network, where only control plane traffic then goes through to the cloud infrastructure. And compliances, whether there's compliance reports built in to the product to do PCI reporting, etc., but multiple ways to get management data and management information that helps achieve compliances such as PCI, but certainly not limited to it. So benefits there as well. And of course, a critical benefit is the concept of redundancy or high availability. With geographically distributed data centers, you have much more peace of mind regarding a failover scenario and having redundancy than in traditional on-premises controllers. And certainly in the reduction of power and operational consumption, while this may not be at the forefront of end-user customers with more of a smaller business practice, for those who are in multi-site distributed, geographically distributed enterprise space, this is certainly a consideration and makes moving to a cloud solution very, very appealing. Management across multiple networks. This is kind of an inherent cloud type of benefit or value add, but it's particularly applicable for our wireless, our hosted and managed wireless story. The ability to have a centralized management to view all of your different wireless networks deployed at multiple locations, extremely critical, highly desirable, not from just an enterprise, but from a retail space, hospitality, etc. And you'll see with many solutions, many vendors who provide a hosted and managed solution, going from an access point or wireless management in their dashboard to then extending out and incorporating switches, for example, or elements of the wired network as well to really paint a full topology of what's going on at these individual sites. And scalability, certainly more of an inherent benefit of cloud, but very, very true for your wireless. Protecting your investment. With many on-premises controllers, you do run the risk, right, of needing to do a forklift upgrade when you've saturated or exceeded a certain AP threshold or user count, and certainly that is not necessary in cloud solutions in the sense of being able to protect your investment and scale up and down, leveraging this hosted infrastructure for that. And when you look at kind of who the players would be delivering cloud solutions, I mean, certainly there have been many players, some early on in the game, as well as just some recent entries into the cloud space. That includes everything from Adtran Pro Cloud, Cisco Meraki, Aruba Central, Ruckus's SAMs, AeroHive, Hive Manager Online, so their online, their hosted option of the Hive Manager. So multiple different players, but these are probably the ones that are the most frequently seen. Airtight is another example of a hosted solution, and many of these have particular verticals in which they advertise to, while some cross over all verticals and have a marketing story wrapped around each vertical. And certainly with AeroHive, you would see that very commonly played in the education space. Ruckus's SAMs, particularly for, you see them in actually like transportation verticals, large public venue type of scenarios. Aruba Central certainly pitches to a smaller end user SMB type of space with their Aruba Instant APs or remote branch offices. Cisco Meraki definitely has a vertical story wrapped around most verticals, and has probably been more traditionally known in SMB although with the acquisition with Cisco, that has changed. And Atrium Pro Cloud has a marketing story within each of the verticals and particularly emphasizes retail, hospitality, education, and government. So lots of different and certainly overlapping verticals that they all play to, but these are probably the most prominent ones that you would see out with a cloud wireless story. Airtight, which is not on this PowerPoint, has a particular play to retail, and it's also a hosted player. So all of this being said, and certainly this would resonate with those on the line already in the wireless practice, that if you're not supporting your customers' wireless, if you're not selling those wireless services, that wireless network, if you're not installing them and managing them, someone else is, right? So wireless, at any time there's a huge market opportunity, that means either you've got that share, you need to start gaining that share, right? Because it's going to go to someone. So if you're not supporting it, someone else is. And then what can we do to get and empower you to become more competitive in this wireless LAN space? How do you pull through additional wireless LAN revenue with your existing customer base, and even prospective customers, kind of complementing that to your day-to-day and perhaps your core services and products that you offer and sell? And so there's multiple challenges when you look at this space of ways that could delay your time to market, ways that could hamper your ability to win and close that particular opportunity, whether it's price points and commissions to the sales team. And this is particularly wrapped around cloud and this MRC type of sell. If you sell something that is MRC, how do you receive commissions for that? Is it all up front? Is it over time? Is it a percentage of that customer regardless of where that customer goes? All those things have to be worked out, and it certainly is critical to how well cloud and MRC wireless LAN is emphasized within that organization, and the price points, of course, wrapped around it. The cost, how do you build this out? Do you put it all into an operating cost, AP, software, services, or do you separate it and make it more of a hybrid model, hardware up front, software up front, services over time, etc.? How do you define your target customer? So who do you really want to go after? How do you get, quote unquote, the most bang for your buck, and spend your time the most fruitfully? The technical expertise, for those folks who are installing wireless networks, you guys have obviously overcome this challenge, but being able to handle scoping out, the site planning, how do I install this wireless network and fine-tune it to then lapse it onto its maintenance or its management contract with little noise, right, which of course is the goal. Going further into the local area network, while some folks may already be playing in that space and maybe feel very comfortable there, there are others who have been operating under a very clear demarcation point into the customer's LAN, and so wireless certainly steps beyond that and can be kind of a brave new world of how to get into that wireless market and handle yourself well. And of course, staffing. And probably the best example of perhaps an unconsidered staffing item would be help desk. So, not just providing technical support to perhaps that IT stakeholder or point of contact at a location, but how do you support the rotating guests at your customer site? So hotel, of course, would be an ideal example. So, who supports Michelle when I go out to the hotel and I can't connect to the wireless? Is that you? Who is that? The customer's responsibility? How is that handled? And that could be an unexpected challenge in delivering a full end-to-end wireless solution to your customer. And then, of course, not just how do I staff for it, but then how do I price for it? Is it per user? Is it per call? Is it per access point? Per room? How do I build that full story together? And certainly, when you look at reoccurring cloud services, and wireless being no exception, there's tends to be an ideal goal of an ROI in 3 to 6 months. So you want to be able to recoup your expenditures, right, in about 3 to 6 months' time. And compounded monthly recurring revenue, of course, immediately increases your business worth. So there's some modeling, of course, that needs to be done here with wireless when you put it into an MRC. How do I recoup my costs and my capital expenditures and the financing, right, that cost of money that rolls into it. But then also then how does that impact the value perception of my business or of my sales funnel, et cetera? Because typically, this reoccurring revenue is about 1.5 as far as business value of what you would look at with traditional NRC type of charges. And then, of course, that question of what comprises my MRC. Do I take the access points as well as the cloud services? Do I wrap in professional services into the MRC? And you see professional services not being limited to configuration and install, but also captive portal development, as well as perhaps LAN refreshes, et cetera. And certainly when we look at these 3 different categories of this reoccurring cloud MRC services, the complete MRC is perhaps not as common as the hybrid model with the hardware up front and the cloud services, customizations, these reoccurring services over the span of the term, and professional services sold independently. And then the complete NRC, so all components purchased up front, and more of a CPE resell. Well, you still see that in certain channels. It's kind of the default. I would attest that that's probably a more early entry play and will most likely evolve into a hybrid or complete MRC as perhaps that wireless practice becomes more routine within that business. So NRC is still certainly out there. It's still certainly done and is not uncommon. However, growing trends and kind of more of a hybrid approach, again, really wrapping yourselves around that monthly reoccurring charge. And the things to weigh in making these decisions, of course, the compounded revenue, right, of the MRC. When you break even, when you hit that point where your ROI, you've had your return on your investment, and the rest is quote unquote gravy. How do you, that compounded revenue, that stickiness of that service, certainly makes you less likely for end user churn, lowers your barrier to entry, so now you have more prospective clients who can get onto the wireless services. But then on the other hand, there's risk there, right? Particularly if you're financing the hardware, the physical, tangible assets. And this may be averted if you choose to resell this to a financing company, and so you're made whole, so to speak, up front, and now are leveraging a financing group. But still some risk play there. The pros and cons of reselling it, certainly a pro would be to be made whole up front and now to lower your risk. But a con could be as overall you'll make less revenue, right, than if you were able to finance it yourself and absorb this financing, because now you have more margin, allow you to be more competitive or just make more margin at the end of the day. So your immediate revenue and margin versus this risk management and potential greater rewards compounded over the length of the term. So different things to consider, and certainly no right answer, no clear, black and white of whether to do it this way or not that way. And many times will ultimately depend upon the existing financing done at that end user site, or perhaps for your other products and services, as well as the financial stability of the end user that you're examining. And then lastly, also kind of what your business model is, and have you guys adopted or are ready to adopt commissions on an MRC, have other cloud services, right, that would be wrapped up into that. So when we talk now transitioning to defining the target customer, one of the other challenges that were identified earlier on, what I would propose is that, to take a look at your existing target customer profile. So excluding wireless, who are those folks that you're approaching with your other services, whether they be hosted security or VoIP services or traditional CPE resale? Who's 80% of your customer base? And then examine, do I have other cloud or MRC services that I could then bundle with my wireless LAN? And this, of course, now could play a role in whether or not it is an NRC or an MRC to your end user customer for wireless, right? So who's 80% of your customer base today? How do you make those pitches to them for your existing products and services? And then how do you sell that to them? Is it an MRC or an NRC? So now can you bundle wireless with these existing packages you have built with your existing customer base? And some great examples of this actually is bundling your VoIP services, whether it's an on-premises managed PBX or a hosted VoIP, with wireless LAN on an MRC. There's already a concept built of a price per seat, a price per user, which lends itself very well to the wireless space from a help desk perspective. And so you're able to bundle that together and that in a very nice package. You also see this wireless bundled oftentimes with wiring, so doing standardized cabling and new wiring infrastructures, adding and bundling wireless on top of that is a fairly common practice. Also bundling with things like security, hosted security applications. And then, of course, there's other options out there where that might be less prevalent of perhaps bundling your wireless with hosted Office 365 or other Azure or other things like of that nature. And then, of course, with any new service that you're bringing to market or new services that you're now pitching to your end user customer, is this a way to facilitate your growth in either new verticals, moving upstream to larger accounts, and could wireless be a way to do that? And I would certainly contend that it is, particularly if you're trying to enter areas like retail or hospitality or education, such key verticals today in either their funding, like through E-rate, and business drivers, that monetization of wireless, the need to be able to provide wireless and gather information off of the wireless network. So definitely key verticals that wireless would help facilitate and bring you into. And as far as moving upstream to larger accounts, perhaps the best example, though certainly not the only one of this, would be to move to these geographically distributed enterprises. So when you're trying to move upstream to larger end-user customer sizes, being able to provide a wireless solution that's centralized and managed, then you offer a great value to that geographically distributed enterprise. So certainly is a vehicle to move you to new target customer profiles, but certainly when you take a look at your existing customer base, who's 80% of those people, what do you already sell to them today, and how do you sell it to them, and now how can you take wireless and fit that into your existing packages as this incremental value add. And we've spoken about this already a little bit on the last slide, but I don't want to underemphasize the value that wireless can have to so many different types of customer base, whether it's SMB, whether it's an enterprise customer, that geographically distributed one we just talked about, home and remote offices, certainly critical. For those offices, scaling where they perhaps are renting space and then plan to move to new infrastructure, being able to take your AP, take that with you, be able to still have the centralized management, very, very critical, very, very critical. Now, restaurants, an increasing need, doctors' offices, libraries definitely also get the E-rate funding, a big move to a lot of hosted and managed wireless services, government, education. We particularly talked about K through 12, but higher level education is certainly also an excellent candidate for wireless. Hotels, we spoke about that a lot. Multi-dwelling units, so think about the power of being able to provide a centrally managed wireless service that maybe you pay per condo or per room, that sort of thing, in a multi-dwelling facility. Maybe package that in with their DirecTV bill or other services that are being provided to all of these different residents. So being able to package wireless into a multi-dwelling. Assisted living, like we spoke about a little bit earlier, and the huge push to wireless there. So a lot of opportunity with the existing customer base, as well as a way to now push into new verticals and new customer sizes. So another thing to consider when you're looking at these challenges to the wireless space, we've already talked about, hey, how do I price point this as an MRC or an NRC? How do I target my customer? Who do I go after? And perhaps how? Another thing to consider is, what is my operational overhead with this? Because this will also help drive you to which particular vendor or solution that you would want to use and partner with for delivering your wireless to your customer. And certainly technical expertise plays a part. For those on the line, intermediate to advanced, it seems like this is an area where you guys have already conquered this particular challenge. How do I do the modeling? How do I do my RF analysis? How do I accurately plan and quote a deal, right, where I'm not overquoting the number of access points and now making myself uncompetitive, but also don't underquote and now have to come back and ask for more funding later. So how do I get a very good estimate of the number of access points? How do I do my site surveys and perform those? And then, and then another question is how do you charge for those? How do you charge for those planning services where you're still in that sales cycle and no one's written a check? So other things to consider that we'll actually talk about in more detail here in just a little bit. And then the staffing, we talked about help desk for guests, but also this concept of having managed services, right? So how do I handle 7x24 support? How do I go further into the land? Do I have the expertise already built for PCI compliance or HIPAA compliance? And how do I overlay my wireless network services to my wired network services? What do I already do today? What's already in my bag, if you will, and what's already in my skill set? And now can I take that and extrapolate it to wireless? And certainly what I would encourage you to look at is in every step of this wireless services solution, think about those over-the-top offerings that not only add additional revenue to you, but also help differentiate yourselves from your competition. So whether it's in planning, being able to offer on-site surveys as well as remote, being able in implementation to now add wireless installation to your cabling or to your VoIP installation, tack that on and bundle that together. Being able to provide things like captive portal development, splash page, etc., being able to offer those types of vehicles, support the billings for the monetization of Wi-Fi, these over-the-top additional value adds now that you can position throughout, and then, of course, advantageous from a revenue perspective, but also extremely valuable to your end user customer and helps further entrench them as your customer and reduce that churn. And of course, and certainly in the management and support life cycles, a lot of different value adds you can offer. Do I offer better SLAs than what's out there in the industry? Best effort ranging to a couple-hour SLA is not uncommon in the wireless space given from a manufacturer. Can I improve upon it? Can I get to an hour? Can I do 30 minutes? What's my SLA for a help desk call? And then how quickly can I do advanced hardware replacement? So can I get out there with an AP under my arm in 4 hours or 2 hours? Next business day, are there different ways you can have these premium services wrapped on top of your wireless delivery? And I do want to take a minute here to talk a little bit more about the wireless management component, because certainly when you talk about hosted and managed wireless services, those management pieces is half of it, right? I mean, it's an utterly critical piece of delivering a successful solution to your end user. And there's a lot of perceived and true value from an end user by having their managed wireless solution. And a critical piece of this would, of course, be the dashboard and having intuitive, customer-friendly tools. So if you are going to allow your end user to go in and see this dashboard and use it, which, as a point of fact, and almost without exclusion of vertical or customer size, they'll want access to it. Is it friendly? How do I limit what they can do so that I can still help them achieve compliances, but also give them the sense of control over their network where they feel empowered to log in and see, and of a very value add to you, they see the services now and the tangible results of your services very easily and on demand for them, right? Very, very, very important. So is it friendly? And certainly, if you think about how us as consumers, our concept of what a dashboard should look like has changed. I mean, we have become so familiar with intuitive apps and websites and applications where we're changing in what our level of expectation might be on a customer or end user non-technical interfacing dashboard and a portal. So certainly a lot of expectation here, and if you can nail this piece of, again, very access that is control to what they would need to be able to modify, view, etc., but also giving them the sense of control over their network, a very, very important win and will help differentiate you. The second piece of this wireless management to consider is the reporting piece. So a lot of different ways that you can have kind of canned, if you will, reporting, but can you make it dynamic? Can you allow your end user to change what their reporting is? Can you allow your end user to decide what they would like to see, what they would not like to see? Can you send different reports to different people? How can you automate this piece? Your reporting is such an excellent way to show the value of your services to your end user as opposed to the break fix, right, where something has gone wrong, and now you're showing the value. This is network is stable, things are working well, but I'm still giving you the strip, right, of the value of my services, the value of your hosted and managed wireless with me. So this is a very, very critical piece in being able to dynamically change it, real-time and historical data, for example, being able to brand it as your own. Great ways to differentiate yourself in the wireless. Monitoring and alerts. I think that my strongest recommendation here, or my words here about monitoring and alerts, really blends into the next one of proactive management. If you're going to send alerts or monitored notifications to your customer, make sure that something is going to be done about them, right? So take your alerts and couple them with proactive management. Certainly there are a lot of tools available across multiple vendors that can give alerts of some kind, and they may be kept internal to the management organization. They may not be shared with the end user. But if you are going to share those with your end user customer, make sure that that is done in combination with some proactive troubleshooting, proactive resolution, because studies have certainly shown that customer satisfaction is significantly higher in that case, and alerts without proactive work on those alerts actually results in a lower satisfaction than if you were to just do break-fix support. So certainly consider that when you're bundling together or looking at the services that you're selling, if they're not particularly your own, how do they handle the monitoring alerts with that proactive management? So we talked about this, at a high level, and just kind of to bring this all together, taking a look at the technical staffing, your exposure to the wireless market, what you're already selling, how well you're staffed to expand, all of these things will help drive a cloud solution, right, that fits best with your needs. And certainly that coupled with, who's my existing customer base and who am I targeting going forward, right? Because it is truly as easy as asking when you go out there to sell your managed PBX or your hosted VoIP or your Office 365 to say, hey, what are you doing about your wireless, right? Start that conversation. It's very easy to get that conversation started. And then, of course, it's a question of, well, who is this customer? What vertical are they in? What matters to them? Are they worried about monetizing their wireless? Are they worried about having help desk support to their rotating users? Are they worried about retail and analytics data for marketing purposes? And taking those things into consideration as you choose your cloud solution. And certainly look at, and I would encourage you to look at, if I need to augment what I have available with a la carte services. So do I need to pull in installation support from someone, or do I need to pull in help desk support from someone? All of these additional value adds really build out this total services solution wrapped around your wireless. And this, of course, then leads you to, do you then build your own or use another? So do you want to take these individual gaps or things to consider and build it out yourselves? Or are you going to piecemeal and kind of put together all of these different solutions and wrap up in your package? And there really is no right answer to this. Depending on your business model and the relationships that you have built, it may absolutely make sense to take individual pieces of captive portal development from this particular partner and wrap that into your wireless services that you do when you cable. All of these different ways to package. But start thinking about that. How am I going to package all of these individual components together to really have an end-to-end services solution? And then lastly, but perhaps the most critical piece, is how are you going to differentiate yourself? So when you look at such a huge addressable market and all of the players involved and all of the different ways an end user can purchase wireless, it's not simply a matter now of competing against, hey, what is the cheap fat AP I can go off and buy at my local hardware store. But you have a lot of different ways that you will be competed against, competed with, and how will you differentiate yourself in your go-to-market? How will you show your wireless is better? The services that you're offering are better than your competition. And different things to consider about this is, of course, there's always a fundamental question of, don't be a grocery store, be a bakery, right? So take all these pieces and blend it into something that's uniquely your own. And a lot of that will be your packaging that you do, building wireless into your existing products and services portfolio. But there will also be things to consider, like, well, is there something about proactive management that I can do that's differentiated? Is there something that the that the wireless manufacturer, the architecture itself, will lend itself to let me differentiate. Can I modify my dashboard? Can I change how I do my reporting? How do I automate and script things so that I can do proactive services at low cost? So, and this differentiation, you may also want to target through the lens of who your target vertical is. For example, in the hospitality space, having a differentiated brand as your hotel's help desk is a huge and phenomenal way to differentiate yourself. And it may not be as appropriate when you're talking about the retail space. There you may want to have your differentiation wrapped around how you will send them their retail analytics, right? How will you help them understand what these retail analytics mean? And then if you look at education, the play there might be more wrapped around the security that you can offer to ensure that that wireless network is secure, that no one's going to be accessing it, who should not be, as well as those children who are accessing the wireless network aren't going to get to places where they shouldn't, right? So depending on where your vertical is, a lot of ways that you can help differentiate and build your story around those particular needs in that space. So very, very fundamental questions to ask if you consider and continue to expand and want to pull through more wireless LAN business, ultimately driving you to choose a particular cloud solution, right? And then what pieces are you going to build yourselves, or are you going to outsource to kind of put together this total package? And then how are you going to differentiate that package? So once you've built it, once you've made that selection, how are you going to make it uniquely your own in that marketing and the value-added services, even really in that sales pitch and presentation, to help stand you out against those who might also be competing for that business. So with that being said, I know we're very close to the top of the hour. So with that, I'll go ahead and transition it back to Sam and see if there's any questions for the Q&A, as well as any additional comments about our cloud services community.
Thanks, Michelle. That was great. We will open up for questions. We got time for a few. If you'd like to ask a question, you can do it one of several ways. You can raise your hand using the Raise Hand button located in the GoToWebinar control panel. If any time your question has been answered, please lower your hand and remove yourself from the queue. Or if you prefer, you can ask via the chat box and the question window in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. So we'll wait a second and see if anything pops up here. Michelle, what is more appealing to a customer, a monthly recurring charge or owning the hardware?
Now, that's a great question. And what I would say is that it is still more common from what I have seen to have hardware purchased up front and have services on an MRC. That being said, this blended model of AP as well as services into an MRC is definitely growing in popularity, and particularly when it's combined with things like an option as a dollar buyout or wrapping around hardware refreshes, right? So at the end of a 2 or 3 year term, being able to get refreshes of new access points and services. So those are probably the two most common ways that we're seeing things develop.
Great. Another question, how do I lead into wireless when I visit a prospective customer?
So one suggestion would be, if this is already an established customer and maybe you're making a visit to them about, renewing their services or adding on other additional services, a simple question of, how are you managing your wireless? And then you can take different tacks based upon their response. So if their response is, we got a couple different things set up, which is very common, right? We've got a couple different manufacturers and we're not really managing it. I would lead into things about the value that they could offer their end users and the value that they could have as a company if they chose to have an integrated wireless solution. And it's not, inappropriate to also mention the security concerns wrapped around an unmanaged wireless solution, particularly if it is kind of an ad hoc services, because that certainly is a huge security threat, not just for the wireless, but for their entire network. If they reply back that they have a service solution or they have a wireless, but it's not managed by anyone, so they're either doing it themselves or it's really no one's looking at it, but it is in a fully integrated solution, I would mention things about and try to probe more into well, how critical is their perceived value of the wireless? What would happen if their wireless went down? What impact would it have on their business and on their customers? And use that as a tact of, well, considering X, Y, and Z, what I could do for you with this management, and now fill in the blanks, and lead it from there.
Awesome. Well, unfortunately, we have hit the top of the hour here, so we probably should wrap this up. We do have a few other questions outstanding, and what we'll do is we'll post them in a conversation on our website, on the Cloud Services Community website. And we'll work with Michelle to answer those questions and any other follow-ups that might pop up. But Michelle, thank you very much for your time today. That was a wonderful presentation.
It was my pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Most definitely. Well, thank you again, ladies and gentlemen, for attending. Please take a few moments to fill out your post-event survey. We love to hear everyone's input and try to attribute that to future events to keep making these better and better. For now, have a great day, and you may now disconnect.